young and restless. All the times Sharon has faced off against a villain. Sharon Newman might be one of Genoa City's most loved characters, but she's also one of its toughest fighters. Over the years, the young and the restless has thrown every kind of nightmare at her, including villains, kidnappings, stalkers, and more. Now, with the show hinting at another scary blast from her past, fans are looking back at all the enemies she has taken on. Every time Sharon has come face to face with a young and restless villain. The newest twist throws Sharon right back into a mental minefield. Matthew Clark is back in the picture. Sharon's past with Matt is one of the darkest chapters in her story, and seeing him reappear, especially after Noah's recent brush with death, pulls her straight into old fears. Spoilers say she will confront him head-on, so fans will once again see the trauma she has spent years trying to outrun. Matt is not the only ghost haunting her. Sharon also crossed paths with Cameron Kirsten, who assaulted her years ago and was the same man she killed. Cameron kidnapped Faith, cornered Sharon, and pushed her to stab him to save her daughter. Even after he died, the trauma never went away, appearing as drug-induced hallucinations. In addition, Sharon and Phyllis were also kidnapped by Martin Lauren. They managed to ride out threats, manipulation, and several close calls. Unfortunately, Sharon faced another death at Aristotle Dumas' chateau in France. Once she made it back to Genoa City, Sharon tried to heal and even considered giving things with Nick another chance. However, Noah's near-death scare opened the door to another nightmare, and Matt Clark walked back into her life. For the unversed, Matt was the same person who sexually assaulted her years ago. Sharon immediately sensed that the old predator was circling her family again. She understood that she would have to do whatever she could to protect herself and her children. The post Young and Restless. All the times Sharon has faced off against a villain appeared first on comingsoon.net, movie trailers, TV and streaming news, and more. Genoa City has always had its heroes, its heartbreakers, and its villains. But among the people who've walked into the storm and somehow emerged stronger, Sharon Newman stands in a category of her own. She has survived stalkers, arsonists, serial killers, schemers, and even her own mind when darkness crept in. Her battles aren't just plot lines, they're long, vulnerable, courageous chapters in a life constantly tested. If Genoa City had a patron saint of resilience, it would be Sharon. And her story, her war stories, are nothing short of legendary. Below is a creative journey through all the times Sharon faced a villain and didn't just survive but rose. 1. Cameron Kirsten, the monster in a suit. To understand Sharon's strength, you must begin with Cameron Kirsten, arguably one of the most chilling villains she ever encountered. Cameron was the kind of man who wore charm like a perfectly tailored suit, but underneath it was something rotten. Sharon sensed it early, in the way he lingered too long, the way his compliments felt like traps. But by the time she realized how dangerous he was, she was already entangled. Their showdown wasn't a single battle. It was a war fought in gasps and whispers, in fear-laced escapes, in the desperate insistence that the people she loved take her seriously. It culminated in Sharon being pushed to the brink. Cameron stalked her, tormented her, and made her relive her trauma again and again. But she survived him. She didn't just endure, she fought back. And years later, when Cameron resurfaced like a nightmare clawing out of the grave, Sharon did what she always does. She faced the villain again. This time, she stood rooted, not a trembling victim, but a calm storm. He couldn't break her twice. Cameron learned far too late that Sharon Newman doesn't stay broken. Adam at his worst, love's shadow turned dangerous. Sharon and Adam Newman have a chemistry that can either light up the world or burn it down. But there were times, especially during Adam's darkest chapters, when Sharon found herself standing across from a man she once loved but no longer recognized. Adam could be manipulative, secretive, impulsive, and ruthlessly self-serving, and Sharon often ended up collateral damage. Their face-offs weren't always shouting matches. Sometimes they were painful negotiations. Sometimes they were teary confrontations. Sometimes they were quiet recognitions that the man she cared for had slipped into moral shadows too dark to follow. And yet, Sharon never cowered. She always demanded the truth, always pushed back on manipulation, always drew a line in the sand when Adam crossed one. She was one of the few people Adam couldn't spin, because she'd already lived through greater monsters. Fighting Adam was less about defeating a villain and more about refusing to lose herself. 3. Patty Williams, a fragile villain and a terrifying threat. Patty Williams, unstable, unpredictable Patty, forced Sharon into confrontations where logic ceased to matter. Patty wasn't evil in the way Cameron was. She was broken. But that didn't make her any less dangerous. Sharon faced Patty during moments when Patty's delusions spun wildly out of control. There were standoffs at gunpoint, frantic rescues, times when Sharon's life was hanging by a thread while Patty muttered to her imaginary cat or fixated on revenge. It was emotional whiplash, fear tinged with empathy, because Sharon, more than most, understood mental illness. She recognized Patty's fractures, but she also knew the stakes. And somehow, even shaking, even terrified, she remained steady. She talked Patty down, faced her without cruelty, refused to escalate the madness. In a world full of villains, Patty was the tragic kind. Sharon survived her, too. For Chelsea Lawson, during her breakdown. Not all villains intend to be villains. There came a time when Chelsea, unraveling under immense emotional trauma, lashed out at Sharon. She saw Sharon as a threat, as the wedge between her and Adam, as the symbol of everything slipping from Chelsea's grasp. Chelsea manipulated situations, projected rage, and tried to pit others against Sharon. It wasn't a physical battle, it was psychological warfare. Chelsea whispered narratives, twisted motives, painted Sharon as a homewrecker, an opportunist, a serpent in the grass. But Sharon had clarity. She saw through the projection. She recognized Chelsea's pain, even when it was weaponized. In confronting Chelsea, Sharon showed her most powerful defense wasn't aggression, it was compassion wielded like a shield. She refused to villainize Chelsea, but she also refused to be her victim. And eventually, the truth, like it always does, emerged.